This is one of those check-ins that's hard to talk about, but I feel like it's necessary. Today, I want to talk about parenting while dealing with depression. The kind that's not just, oh, I had a bad week, but the kind where you wonder if you still want to be here. You feel guilted into staying, except you stay because your child. And if you are already feeling that lump in your throat, don't worry, you are not alone. And this is a safe place. No one's here to shame. So let's kind of get into the invisible weight of battling depression as a parent. There can be kind of this like unique pain that comes with being a parent when you feel like you're barely surviving. Because, like, on one hand, you know you're needed, you know your child deserves stability, and child is even worse if you're their only stable parent or you're the dependable parent. You're like, I can't leave my baby with this fool. On the other hand, you might be waking up every day feeling like there's parts of you disappearing. It's hard when it feels like your child is your anchor, like the only thing keeping you from floating away. And we don't hear people talk enough about the guilt that can come with that. The guilt of loving your child more than anything, but also wishing that you aren't here. The guilt of knowing you should want to live for yourself, but right now, feeling like I can't even imagine that version of myself existing. That is why I wanted to make this episode. Not to give cliches or toxic positivity, but to help you name what's real. Because naming it keeps it from eating us alive. So let's talk about that trap of staying alive for them. Let's be honest, as a parent, sometimes the only thing keeping you alive is that thought of your child. And honestly, that's okay for now. It's a start, but that's not sustainable. Because when your only reason to live is outside you, it means you're living in emotional survival mode and you have no control over how those outside things react, what they do. But the thing you do have control over is yourself, your own actions, thoughts. And that mindset breeds resentment and burnout. You can start to feel like, for some people, they start to feel like parenting is a punishment. And it's not that you don't love your child, but a lot of times it's that you can't find yourself in your own life anymore. You will have no struggles loving your children. The struggle is loving yourself. And one of the things I really want you guys to get from today's check-in is that you are allowed to want more than just survival. You're allowed to want joy again. And staying alive just for the kids is a bridge, not a home. I'm glad it's keeping you here. I'm glad it's keeping you floating. It's not a permanent solution and it's not as sustainable as you may think. I'm happy that we're getting to a place that we're starting to see depression as more than, oh, she's just sad sometimes. Because for a long time, that's how people treat it. But depression rewires your brain. It rewires your brain to stop anticipating pleasure. That's why nothing feels exciting. Not your favorite food, not your day off, not that that is something that you used to love. So when people say, oh, just go outside, girl, go take a walk, it almost can sound insulting. But the truth is, the body has to lead sometimes when the mind can't. And sometimes you literally have to move first and feel later. A slow walk, sitting by water, dance in the kitchen, even if you feel a little dumb, that movement tells your body, I'm still here. The thing is, sometimes we feel like I'm just going to sit here still in isolation and think myself out of depression. And don't get me wrong. Again, y'all know I am a person that definitely needs time alone to recharge. I feel like I say that every third episode. But there's a healthy version of that, and there's a version of that that actually just makes it worse. And it's why sometimes when people tell you things like, think happy thoughts, it feels insulting because you're like, I've tried. Don't you think I've tried? Or I'm not capable. I know you're saying just make up this scenario, just think about that thing, but my brain literally struggling. And that is why you need more than just trying to think your way out of depression. You got to move your body. You got to allow it to feel it. Sometimes we got to rewire our whole nervous system. For some of us, we got to rewire the way we think. And so if we haven't done that, that trying to think your way out of it is simply not going to work. Therapy is great. As a therapist, I think therapy can be a powerful tool. But I tell people all the time, not all healing happens on a couch. And so if you are a person who's like, look, I've tried the therapy thing and it literally just, I mean, I guess it helped a little, but it really didn't feel worth it. Okay, well, let's look at some other types of therapy. So there's somatic therapy, which helps you process emotions through your body. This is those TikTok videos you see where they're like, trauma is stored in the hip. And so you gotta shake that trauma out. There's also art or music therapy because sometimes we need expression without words. For others, there's ecotherapy, which is using nature as a medicine. It's like gardening, grounding, walking barefoot, swimming. There's group therapy where you get to sit with others and recognize that you are not alone. And having others share their stories and what's working for them. Because the truth of the matter is, I see this all the time. Sometimes when you're talking alone with your therapist, one, sometimes people try to hide things from us, which like makes the process harder, y'all. It's just a heads up. But it's almost this feeling of like, well, I want my therapist to like me, or like I want to impress them, or um, I don't know, they're gonna be so disappointed. And so one, we definitely have to get rid of that. But sometimes it feels easier when I'm in a group of my own peers, right? And these peers, they're going through the same thing as well. So it, I am learning in a community. I'm learning from others as they're learning from me. Now, there's also EMDR, which is eye movement and reprocessing. And it's a type of therapy where it's recommended for people who have a lot of traumatic experiences. And basically, what it does is the therapist like guides you through recalling a traumatic event. And while you're focusing on these distressing thoughts, images, while you're recalling like the traumatic event, there's usually some type of like light where the therapist is guiding the light while your eyes are like following the movement of that light. Now, this may sound silly if you've never heard of it before, like, wait, what? But the science behind it is that we have found that eye movements like can help the brain process and integrate trauma when it's done in a therapeutic way. And the therapist can also use other techniques like cognitive restructuring. And it has actually proven to be actually really successful for a lot of folks. Now, one of the things I do want to say is that EMDR is not an option for everybody. Sometimes people just aren't a good candidate for it. And usually, when you're going through intake or as your therapist is getting to know you and they are an EMDR specialist, they'll kind of let you know if you're not a good candidate for it. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, but it does mean that sometimes we have certain things that makes it so that putting you in EMDR, it will actually be more harmful than not. And so that's more of a precaution on the therapist side. Now, also for my mystic girlies, we got energy healing, we got Reiki, but also, guys, I'm going to say this. As someone, I have talked about this on the podcast several times. I am someone who has struggled with depression since I was like 5, I'm sure. And as someone who has that long history, um, we gotta also talk about medication. And we gotta talk about it because I get it. I was someone who definitely in my 20s especially, definitely struggled with medication compliance. And it's so funny to me when clients talk to me about struggling with meds and they're like, you don't get it. And in the back of my head, I'm like, man, my whole 20s is a testament of why medication compliance is important when you need to be on it. And here's the thing, you don't have to be on these medications forever for some folks. I know with myself, the way my depression works is like I will be good. Sometimes I'll be good for like up to 3 years, like literally no major depressive symptoms, right? Sad things happen. I'm sad, regular reaction to the things that are happening in my life. And then I'll just get hit with a major depressive episode. I will just one day, I know for me, I had to learn my triggers. And for me, one of the first telltale signs that, like, oh, I'm about to slip into a depressive episode is like, I stop wanting to take care of myself. Hate the idea of showering. I hate the idea of putting on makeup and getting ready. I hate the idea of taking care of me. And so I know that, like, once I start getting that, I'm like, oh, yep, well, let's call my favorite doctor. Let me make sure there's not a Wellbutrin shortage. Like, I know that's my cue. But in my past, definitely when I was in my 20s, like that was hard for me. I would do what people who struggle with med compliance typically do, which is you take the medication, it starts working, you start feeling well, and then you go, you know what? I feel great. I don't think I need medication. But you feel great because you're taking the medication. Like that's why you're feeling great. It's working. You took the pills and the pills are working. That's what's happening there. And then, so you take yourself off, which, guys, stop taking yourself off medication without talking to your doctors. There is a step down process. There are certain medications where you can really mess with your chemistry if you do not do it correctly. But you do that step down and then you're fine for a while because the stuff is still in your system. And so it convinces you that, yeah, I'm still okay. Depending on what medication we're in, it might be in your system for a little while. And so, yeah, see, I didn't need it. I'm okay. And then you slowly start going back. And for some folks, and this was my issue, I didn't go back like all at once. Like it wasn't like I would stop taking my medication and then I would go back to where I was at my worst, right? It would take time. I would start with the little symptoms again and it would be that slow buildup again. So by the time it was like, oh crap, yeah, I need to go talk to my psychiatrist. By the time we get there, I done fucked around for like 6 months, slowly getting worse. And like really sabotaging myself and having to start all over. I get it. It is hard. And for some people, it feels like taking medication is a failure or a weakness, but it's literally just chemistry correction. So your soul can do the actual work. Yes, for some people, when they struggle with depression, it's because very specific things have happened, right? But there's also people who struggle with depression where it's out of nowhere. Nothing in particular is happening right now. Yeah, I'm sure it's connected to some things in the past, but nothing particular is happening right now. But I am feeling at the pits. I'm feeling at my worst as if the worst thing that could ever happen to me just happened yesterday. And when you struggle with depression where it just comes out of nowhere, it doesn't really feel connected to something that's going on now, that's usually a chemistry thing. And this gets you on the same playing field as others who don't struggle with depression. The medications is to help you get stable neurotransmitters, right? This is your dopamine, which is that reward system. That's that motivation, right? You need that serotonin for mood stability. You need that oxytocin for connection and for bonding. You need endorphins for pain relief and emotional buffering. And when our brain simply doesn't have the things it needs to even utilize the tools and skills that we're learning in the different therapies and the different books and the different things out of our emotional wellness toolbox, then it is hard. And you're going to keep feeling like you're stuck and you're going to keep feeling like, well, nothing works. Well, but if my chemistry is all over the place, then yeah, the things aren't going to work. The medication isn't to completely take away everything or making you feel like a zombie. It's to get you to your baseline so you can utilize the tools that you need so you can make sustainable changes in your life that lead you back to a path where you can feel happiness and joy again. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, and I wanted to talk about depression specifically with parents in this check in, is because a lot of times there's a lot of shame around it. I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, I joined those like pregnancy boards, right? Or forums. I don't remember which ones I was on. But I remember like they have some for the women that are pregnant, and then they had other sides of the forums where like after you had your baby, you can still make connection with other moms and all this stuff. And let me tell you, I had to take myself out there because those women were vicious. And sometimes someone would mention like depression, and especially like once your child was no longer a baby, they were like a toddler or above. Um, and y'all gotta remember, I had my baby 2017. Back then, we didn't have the knowledge about, hey, postpartum lasts actually more than a couple months after you give birth. Um, Us didn't feel new, but that wasn't something that was widely accepted. And I remember like moms would kind of hint at the fact that they were depressed, and other moms would get on them. You just had a baby. You had a baby worth living for. And here's the thing, people say that a lot to parents like, oh, so you just gonna die like you ain't got a baby? And if you have somebody in your life that struggles with suicidal ideation, that is not the way to try to keep them here. You cannot shame a person into loving life. It just can't. It doesn't work. It might put some fear in them for a little bit, but it's never sustainable. And there can be just a lot of shame associated with struggling with ideations when you are a parent and you are someone responsible for little people. But the thing is, parenthood, it does not erase your humanity. You can love your child and still be in pain. You can want to be here for them and wish you did not have to fight this hard. You can be a good parent and still struggle with feeling broken. This is myth that like once you have a child, you're supposed to be fueled by endless purpose. But like that's not real life. Sometimes you love your kids so deeply it hurts. And it still doesn't refill your cup. That's not bad parenting. But that is a nervous system that's run dry. I remember when my daughter was like, I think around 4, I had went through a really bad depressive episode, like really, really bad. And it had started like at the beginning of that year. And I knew it was coming. But at the time, I was Morehouse Men. Anyways, I was dating this Morehouse man that none of my friends like. And they had a lot of stuff going on. And so, anyways, and that dating experience was very energetically draining, but I did not recognize that at the time, right? And so I would bring up like, "Hey, I think I'm starting to get depressed." And he would then be like, "Well, I'm depressed. Look at all the things I'm going through. Baby me, pamper me, emotional me." And I kind of just like put my stuff on the background. Now, for other reasons, I end up walking away from this gentleman, and walking away from him really helped me to focus more on my own mental health. And I wanna be clear, I'm not blaming him and saying like, "Oh, he was holding me back." But walking away definitely without feeling like I'm carrying somebody else's emotional stuff helped free me and help me realize, "Oh, this weight that I'm carrying isn't just like this other person. This is my weight. This is my emotional stuff too." I kept putting it back in the foreground. And I remember going back to therapy and getting a new psychiatrist. And I remember feeling like such a failure because I had been off antidepressants for like a while, like probably 4 years. And I remember because me and her dad were so worried. Her dad knew I struggled with depression. And so me and him were like so super worried that I was going to have postpartum. And after I had her, I didn't. Like, actually, if anything, I was on go mode. I was like, yes, baby, boss mom, we about to do this. I'm going to finish this degree. I'm going to get out here in the field. Like, your girl immediately hit the green light when she had the baby. And so, yeah, it had definitely been like a couple of years um, since I had it. And I remember having to go back to therapy and having to go back to my psychiatrist and being and like feeling like, hey guys, I failed. You know how we thought I was healed? I'm not. Turns out I'm not. And that's how it felt walking into there. That's how it felt going back on medication. That's how it felt going back to therapy, having to talk about my feelings again. And one of the things that happens with therapists when therapists go to therapy, which therapists should, I'm a huge believer. If your therapist has never been to therapy, to me, that's a red flag. They should know what it feels like to be on the other side and have to be vulnerable with another human being to better understand their clients, to better understand their clients' blogs, to better understand how that might feel and why it might take a while to open up and be slower for some people. That's neither here nor there. That's just me on my little soapbox, real quick. Um, but I've talked to a lot of folks where that's how it feels when they are realizing, damn, I'm depressed again. Like I failed, especially if you've done therapy before, especially if you did meds before. Or even if you're still on medication and you're like, this has been working great for like 3 years. I'm on my meds. I take my meds faithfully. Why all of a sudden I'm using the tools? They gave me the tools, the CBT triangle. Why ain't the CBT triangle working? And sometimes we just need a touch up. Sometimes we need a change in our medication. And it's not a failure if you have to go back. It's not a failure if you need a tune up. And I remember having that feeling and talking to a therapist who I really respect. I really respect them in the field. And they did help me with a lot of work. But this therapist said to me one time, like, so what about your child? You a whole mom. So you're just going to take away her ability to have a mom? And I get what they were doing, but I remember them saying that. And I didn't go back to therapy for a year. I felt so much guilt and I felt so much shame. And I was like, damn, I thought this was my safe place. I thought this was going to be a place where I can express that and not be met with judgment. And immediately felt like I was met with judgment. And if you have ever had someone do this to you, I'm here to tell you there is no shame in being able to admit that, to be able to recognize that. I know when I was at my worst, and I know when I was there, to me, it felt like I feel like me and my depression is more harmful for my child. I feel like her having to deal with me going through this is worse than me being here. I feel like I'm going to damage her with my issues and my shit. I feel like she'll have a better chance without me. Those were the things I was telling myself back then. And so hearing somebody say, well, you a whole mom out here, you just gonna leave her alone like that, all that did is guilt me. That did not convince me to stay because I felt like my depression and my inability to get myself out of it would ruin her and be worse off for her. And that's the mindset we're in sometimes. And we don't really like to admit that out loud, right? Because what will people think of me? Because none of the parenting books talk about that. Those are thoughts you're not supposed to say out loud. But as I keep repeating in this episode, holding those type of things in because of the shame keeps you sick. You do have to express it. Express it in a safe place, especially with someone who can handle it like a professional, and allow yourself to do the things and get the tools, the medication, the space, whatever it is that you need to get you back to your baseline and to feeling like life is worth living again. So I know I gave you guys some like different types of therapies, right? There's other things as well that can kind of help you rebuild when you are feeling that sadness come in. Now, you don't need to have necessarily a 10-step plan, but you do need to find micro pleasures, small things that tell your nervous system, I'm still alive. That's kind of like making a playlist that's called Reasons I Want to Stay, where you have nothing but happy, upbeat, sunshiny type music. This can be like rearranging the space that you're always in. I know a couple years ago, I lived in a different house. And I had my office upstairs. My bedroom was downstairs, but I had my office upstairs. And I spent a lot of time because I was doing therapy virtually in that office. And the office was plain. And I remembered something this guy I dated. I once dated this guy who was an artist, a great, amazing man, but he was an artist. And so he was really big on making sure his space reflected his personality. And I remember he had came over to my house one time because I had a daughter, I really didn't like men coming to my home. I had a bad experience dating a DeKalb County police officer who kind of stalked me and so forth. We don't need to get into that. We don't need to get into that. Anyways, but because of that situation, I did not like men knowing where I lived. But me and him had been dating for a while. And so I had finally let him come over to my place when my daughter was with her father. And he walked into my townhome. He was like, why don't you got anything on your walls? I was like, what? He's like, why don't you got no paintings on your walls? Why don't you have like decorative pillows on the couch or like anything of your personality? He had told me, he's like, you have such a vibrant personality. I would not know this if I walked into your home. And to me, I was like, because at the time I had just got approved to buy a home. And I was like, oh, this is temporary. I'm just going to stay here till my lease is up and, blah, blah, blah. And so for me, I was like, well, because I'm not going to be here long. And he was just like, it doesn't matter. This is where you're spending a lot of your time. This is where you're coming home to. You need to come home to a place that feels like rest. You need to come home to a place that feels beautiful. And that kind of really, really stuck with me. And so when I was in my old house, I realized I was stuck in my upstairs office for so many hours of the day. And so I was like, okay, I want to decorate my office. And I did. I went all out. The people who know me in real life that follow me on my Instagram, y'all know I was posting all types of little arts and crafts, Hobby Lobby stuff that I was making, creating my own things, buying a whole bunch of pictures, creating a really nice aesthetic. And it did help improve my mood because, okay, if I got to be here, but I'm being here and I'm somewhere that feels comfy, I'm in a chair that feels really plush and really kind of like velvety. And all my walls are filled with beautiful pictures of Black women. And I got all these like beautiful plants set up and I got crystals everywhere. Lord knows I was in my crystal phase back then. But it felt so good. It might have been because of crystals now that I'm saying that. Yeah. It might have felt good because of crystals. But we're gonna say it's because I decorated. It could be both. Um, but it felt good and it really improved my mood because okay, if I'm gonna be here, I want to be somewhere that feels comfortable. And that really did something to me. So it might be rearranging your space, painting that wall, putting up pictures, making it somewhere you want to be. This can be like getting some sunlight, especially if you know you struggle with seasonal affective disorder. Go outside in the morning, sun gaze for 5 or 10 minutes. Do some light therapy. Get you a light therapy lamp. Sit in front of it before you go start your day for the morning. This can be joining a new small community, being someplace where you're making bonds with new people and you're exploring. This could be setting tiny goals. It doesn't have to be something big and extravagant. It can be every day I'm going to take one picture to prove that I was here for a month. I'm just going to take one picture a day of something that made me smile or something I found interesting. If we're not smiling, okay, something I found interesting. Okay, if it's not something I find interesting, it can be something blue. But having little goals for yourself. Now, of course, I'm going to recommend for you guys some books. If you're ready to read but not ready for toxic optimism, here are some books that might meet you where you are. First, of course, we got The Body Keeps the Score. And that book is about basically understanding trauma in the body. There's Lost Connections by Johan Hari. And this one is like for exploring how society fuels depression. There's No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz on inner body parts and self-compassion, and many others. And again, I know you guys who have listened to me forever know exactly the story that I'm about to say, but like years ago, I had a mentor, and for some of us, we're just like, I don't know if I want to read those type of books. But I had a mentor years ago who told me to think of a list of people that I admire. And it doesn't have to be I want to be them or I want to be them or anything, but it's just people who I'm like, you know what? They did something like really, really great though. Like they accomplished something really dope. And she said, and go read their autobiographies or biographies on their life. And she said, because what you're mostly going to find out is that most of these people weren't the like class king. They weren't like the prom queen. They weren't like the most talented person. For a lot of these people, what you'll find is that they weren't the person everybody's like, yeah, they're going to be something great. They're going to be something amazing. Yeah, they probably had one or two people in their life, but they weren't that golden boy person. And you'll see like how they came from trauma, how they came from sometimes mundane everyday things and still were able to make greatness. You'll read books and stories about people who were 38 before they got their big break. You'll read books and stories of people who everybody says their ideal was stupid and it was dumb, and now their name is a household name. And she said, read those books to encourage yourself and remind yourself that you can feel ordinary. You can feel like I keep falling and stumbling, and I feel like my nickname should be Can't Get Right. And it still doesn't mean you're not meant for extraordinary things. The story doesn't have to start off paved in gold for you to be someone who is memorable. That's something someone told me over 10 years ago. And even now, every couple years, I remind myself of that and I revisit a list of people who I'm like, they're awesome to keep myself motivated, to remind myself anything can happen. So if you're like, I don't want to read those type of books, okay, then read the type of books that encourage you, that uplift you. And kind of going back to what I was talking about with like setting small things, I think having things to look forward to is also a big one because depression like kills the future tense. Everything starts to feel and sound like it's forever and forever is right now. And I'm not saying create a 5-year plan. You can create something next week. You can create something to look forward to at the end of this month or something to look forward to in 3 months. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be expensive. This can be, okay, this movie's coming out and I really want to go see it on premiere day. And so, you know what? Actually, guys, something I used to do back in the day, and I actually just started doing it again, is there's this website called Skyscanner, and they have great deals of like flights and hotels. But the reason I like Skyscanner the most is because like they have this part on the website you can put in like where you're flying from, and then they have an option to put to everywhere. So instead of saying from Atlanta to Detroit, I would say flying from Atlanta, and then I will put the option anywhere. And what it does is like populate all these possible flights that are coming up within the time frame that you selected to different areas. And they list them also by how cheap they are. And especially when I was a broke grad student, I used to go on there, click that, and look and see that I could get a flight from here to Miami and be like, bet, flight to Miami, $31. Yeah, let's do it. And I would go to Miami for a day. I would go to all these little places for a 1 day, 2 day trip. You're like, I don't have the money. That's why I used it. And again, sometimes, well, girl, I don't got the money and I don't want to pay for its hotel. Girl, I was doing 1 day trips. I was flying in that morning, heading to the beaches, soaking up the sun, having really great food at a restaurant I had saved on my phone, and then going back to the airport and going home so I could go to sleep. And that was my little thing to keep me, especially when I had that really bad depressive episode. Going back to traveling and going back to doing things like that really, really helped me because I had these little things to look forward to and they weren't a big cost or expense to me. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. This can be there's a concert coming up, and I know I really, really used to love this band. I'm just going. And here's the thing I know a lot of people are going through a season of aloneness right now. And it's not even purposeful. You wanted to make friends. You wanted to have a partner. You wanted to do the things. And so it's like, well, I can't make these plans for the future to look forward to because I have no one to do it with. Stop letting people hold you back. Do it by yourself. As someone who has been traveling by herself since she was 6, and yes, I am not over exaggerating. My dad was a diplomat, so he moved to random countries every couple of years, and they used to put me on an airplane. Back then, you could pay for what they would like call like a guide, and so every stop a flight attendant would like you would have to sit in a seat afterwards, and then she would like take you to the lounge where you got to chill out in one of the lounges until it was time for your next flight. Then another flight attendant would come and get you, walk you in flight, make sure you got on the plane safely. They were sending me to fucking Mexico by myself, from Ohio to Mexico, 6 years old. By the time I was 11, they were sending me to Colombia by myself, and at that point, they're like, "You can read. We feel like you'll be fine." No, no, I got 3 or 4 connections. Man, them boomer parents are a trip. Don't I don't mean to get sidetracked, but every now and then I think about something from my childhood that my parents denied happened, and I'll just be like, I mean, thank God I wasn't kidnapped. Anyways, getting back to my point, you can do the things alone, and it's not as bad and as scary as you think. I'm in a season right now where I really want to do things alone, and it's been great because my girlfriends have been so understanding and respectful of that. And I just booked the flight, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get on that flight now that I'm saying that out loud. But it's one of those weekend trips where I'm just like, all right, I'm going to go over here to this beach by myself for a day or two. I've been doing classes by myself. I actually have a um, like this ceramic house building class actually coming up pretty soon that I'm going to be at. I also recently booked one of those carpet making classes where they you can create your own carpet, like animation carpet all the time. And you know what I do when I go to place? I have gone to this one pottery art class several times by myself this year. And you know what I do when I'm in those places where I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be awkward or I don't really want people to talk to me. I just come and I download some podcasts or I download on my Netflix something to watch, or I just put on music and I bring my headphones and I be at that pottery class by myself. I listen to the instructions and put it back on. I go to restaurants by myself. I I had somebody last year who like really, really struggled with that because they would like hit me up and be like, "Where are you at?" And I'm like, "Red Lobster." They're like, "With who?" I'm like, "By myself." They're like, why wouldn't you just call me?" Sir, I'm not trying to eat with you right now. I'm enjoying eating. I am enjoying this flight of margaritas all by myself. All by myself. And even in those settings, I would sometimes bring my headphones and watch something. I've have went and brought my books with me as I'm waiting for the food. It does not have to be scary. And honestly, I can't tell you how many people I've met that way, going off and doing something by myself. So I know I'm getting sidetracked, but don't let that be the thing that stops you. Build a routine of small forward glances. Put something on a calendar, even if it's lunch by yourself or watching the sunset. And that's how you start to rebuild time. You start rebuild that sense of I have a future. Now, as you guys know, these episodes are just check-ins. They're not full episodes. So I do recommend if you're like, okay, this is touching something, but not fully at one, let's revisit some of the things I recommended. Yeah, let's start there. But you now know the terms and this language you can use to research, to look up other people's podcasts or YouTube videos on it. Parent depression guilt. And if this episode hit too close to home, let's take a deep breath, a belly breath, and then release. You made it here. And that's proof that there's still something in you that wants to stay. You don't have to know why yet, but just honor that spark. Even if you don't feel it, honor that spark. And if things ever feel too heavy, please reach out for support. Now, if you're like, I don't have a therapist, I don't have insurance, I don't have the money for that. In the US, when you're having active suicidal ideation, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. But for more long-term, long care approaches, look in your community. I can't tell you how many resources there are of clinicians having like sliding scale fees, having free groups. And there's also this website, openpathcollective.org, and they have affordable counseling on there where you can find licensed therapists for as low as like $30. There are clinicians who are on there that just save slots of donated time to work with people who are struggling financially. I have done that throughout my career as a therapist. I even still do that now where I have a certain amount of slots that I make available for people that I know are struggling and can't pay. Don't allow excuses for stopping yourself from making the next step, which is an action to get you back to feeling like you. There's no shame in it. I don't want you to feel any guilt, but I do want you to take the necessary steps that you need to take. Now, that's all I have for today's episode. I really hope you guys got something out of it. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at She Wolf Alchemy. Make sure if you like the episode, share it, like it, leave a review with some words. It's so helpful and it lights up our day. We really appreciate that, guys. So that's all for today's episode. You will hear the sound of my voice again next Sunday. Bye.